Hi, my name is Ali and I'm a software engineer. I started working in tech 2 years ago because I really love coding. I actually have a biochemistry degree and then I went back to college for my master's degree in computer science so that I could transition into becoming a software engineer full time. I'm making some videos at the request of my viewers asking me to explain basic programming concepts in languages like Python and Java. So if you're a professional or somebody who is currently taking computer science classes in school, this video may not be for you, and that's okay. I will not be going into super detailed or heavy topics. I will only be going based on a need to know information sort of situation because this video is geared towards hobbyists and absolute beginners who have never done programming before and are interested in learning more. So I will omit some information that I feel like might be a bit overwhelming for beginners or first timers. However, you are completely free to use available resources on the web such as Baldung, W3 Schools, geeksforgeeks.com. All of these sorts of resources have helped me out a lot. Also, make sure that you check out official docs related to that programming language that you're interested in, and also check out YouTube for any tutorials that other people might have posted. If you would like suggestions for some physical books, this is a good book for absolute beginners. It is called Head First Java. It's from O'Reilly and it explains Java programming in very simple concepts and it doesn't go too deep into specifics. This book is going to be the next step up. This is Java, a Beginner's Guide 10th edition, and it is going to go more in depth into a lot of different topics, and it is very helpful for understanding the foundations of Java and getting a good grasp of the fundamentals. This is the OCP Java 21 Developer Study Guide. This is what I'm using to study for the Java OCP 21 exam. It's going to have more detailed information, and that information is going to be specific to the release of Java 21 and anything that might be relevant on the certification test. In this video, I'll be going over some basic Java concepts, including data types. We'll also be doing loops and conditional statements. So first off, when we have a class in Java, this is how we're going to start. So I have a class name YouTube September 7th, and I'm going to need to add a method to this class so that we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to do public static void main string args, and this auto-completed for me. Public is an access modifier that allows this method to be called from outside of the class. If the method was private, if the access modifier was private, it could only be called within the class. Static means that we can call this method without having to instantiate the class. Essentially, a class is like a template, and when you instantiate that class, then you're creating an object, and that object can hold different states and will also contain methods. However, this time we're not going to go into classes very much, so I'm just going to be using the main method. The main method is always called when a Java program is started. We're going to start with some primitive data types, so we're going to go ahead and create an int. So int num of pies will equal 5. So notice how when we are using Java, we have to explicitly declare the data type that we're using, and then next we're going to have the variable name, then we're going to have the assignment operator, and then we're going to have the actual value that we're assigning. The value on the right will be assigned to the variable on the left. Here I'm creating an int variable, which is an integer. It is a primitive type, so it is not the same as an integer object, which we might discuss later. But essentially, an int is a whole number, and the size of an int is 2 to the 32nd power. I will give the maximum value of assigned integer. So assigned integer means that it has plus or minus, and the maximum value of assigned integer is 2,147,483,647. If you're not big on numbers, that's not a huge detail that you need to remember, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what a long is. So a long can be number of people on the planet. So the number of people on the planet is a really big number, and if you look at the maximum value of assigned integer, we have a little bit over 2 billion. So if we are going to use over 2 billion, then it makes sense to use a data type that has more space, and in this case it would be a long. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 8_200000000 and add a capital L and a semicolon. So the L at the end is going to denote that this is a long data type, and then the underscores are just for readability purposes. So they're just for us. The computer will just ignore them. The program will ignore them. But you can see here that 8,200,000,000 people is larger than the maximum value of assigned integer. So that's why it makes sense to use a long. So a long is also a whole number. It's also a primitive type. So an int is 32 bits or 2 to the 32nd power, whereas a long is going to be 64 bits or 2 to the 64th power. All right, so next we'll do floats and doubles. So a float, we could say is cost equals 3.99. And we have to add an F at the end to tell the Java program that this is a float. So a float is a floating point number. It is also a primitive type. And like an int, a float is 32 bits. Next we have a double. So we could do double pi equals then 3.1415. Oops, sorry, 15. Cool, and then it auto-completes for me. So a double is also a floating point number. It's also a primitive, and it takes up 64 bits, just like a long. So notice how when you use an int, then you don't have to use a suffix like you do with a long. And similarly, when you use a double, you don't have to use a suffix like you do with a float. So next we'll do a string. And we'll say some text. Here we have a new variable and a new data type. So we have a string data type, and the variable name is some text, and the text is, "Hi, my name is Henry." Notice how we're not just using letters, we're also using characters like a comma and an exclamation point. So a string can hold other types of characters too, including special characters like tabs or new lines. Lastly, we also have booleans. So we can take a boolean is cold and assign it to true. So notice how true is lowercase. So we can take another variable and we can set it to is false, and then this will be also lowercase. False will also be lowercase. So now that we have some basic data types, let's go ahead and get into conditional statements. So we're going to use an object called a scanner to take input from the command line. So I'm going to say scanner input equals new scanner system.in. And when I go ahead and press tab, then it'll auto-complete for me, and it'll also import the scanner. I'm going to create an int called speed, and I'm going to set it to input.nextInt, and then we can go through a conditional statement. So based on the person's speed, we're going to say whether or not they're going too slow or too fast, or whether they're going to get a ticket. So I'm going to do if speed is greater than 50, then I will go ahead and create a message. So I'm going to do string message, and I'm going to initialize it to an empty string. So when you see double quotes right here with nothing in between, that means it's an empty string. And I'm going to go ahead and do message will equal, you're going to get a ticket, buddy. So now we can go ahead and check the next case. So this is anything over 50. So let's do else if speed is over 30, then we're going to say message equals, you're going too fast. Slow down. And then we're going to say else if speed is greater than 15, then we're going to say message equals, you're going the speed limit. Okay, you're within the speed limit. Good job. And then else, we're going to say you're going too slow. Here we're going to take in the user input from the command line. We are going to create a string and just have it empty. And then we're going to go through this conditional statement here. So if your speed is greater than 50, we're going to say you're going to get a ticket, buddy. If you say their speed is greater than 30, it's going to say you're going too fast, slow down. If the speed is greater than 15, you're within the speed limit, good job. Otherwise, it's going to say you're going too slow. And then after we get a message, we're going to do system.out.println, and we are going to print that message. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So I'm going to stop this right quick. I'm going to give a message. I'm going to say, please check your speed. And then add a semicolon. Okay, so it says, please check your speed. Now we're going to type our speed in. So I'm going to say 60, and it's going to say, you're going to get a ticket, buddy. So what happens is that we are going to give an input, and then it's going to check our input against each of these conditions. Once it finds a condition that's true, it'll stop going through the rest of the conditions, and it'll only execute the statements that are within the code block associated with that condition that was true. So here we have, please check your speed. If we tried something else, then maybe we'll give 15, and it's going to say you're going too slow. So when we put in 15, it's going to check, is your speed greater than 50? If it's not, then we're going to ignore this and go to the next one. Is your speed greater than 30? If it's false, we're going to go to the next one. Is your speed greater than 15? Technically, it's not, because we are using greater than instead of greater than or equal to. So we could improve this program by using greater than or equal to. Save and run. And then we'll go ahead and type 15 again. And now it'll say, you're within the speed limit, good job. And that's because before we were excluding 15. Now because we've used the equal sign, we are including the 15. So next, I'm going to go ahead and put all of this into a function, and a function is essentially a way of organizing code and reusing it so that we don't have to keep copying and pasting or retyping the same code over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight some of this code, and I'm going to right click and use refactor, extract method, and then I'm going to say get speed. And then this is going to return a message, and this is the message that we're updating depending on whether or not a condition was true or false. And then it will go ahead and print out that message. But this is only being used once, so I want it to be used multiple times. So instead, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and refactor this without the input.nextInt. Alright, and so now it'll say int speed equals input.nextInt. And so now we have speed on the outside, and we have get message, and we can create a while loop. So I'm going to do while speed is greater than 0, and then I'm going to use curly braces, and I'm going to cut this and put it in here, and I will also take this and put it in here as well. And let me also take this message and put it in here. And let's see, what else do we have? We need to take part of this, so I'm going to do Control C. I'm going to put, we're going to say 1, and then here we're going to take in the speed. Alright, so I'm just here initializing the speed to 1. It's going to ask for your speed. Please check your speed. I'm going to change that to a colon. It's going to get the next int from the scanner, and this is getting the data from the command line like we put it in just now. And then it will get a message based on your speed, and then it'll print out a message. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, please check your speed, 15. It says you're within the speed limit, good job. And then it says please check your speed again. So 100. It says you're gonna get a ticket, buddy, and then it's gonna say please check your speed again. This will continue to loop until I tell it to stop, and I said as long as speed is greater than 0, keep running. So now if I put 0, it'll say you're going too slow and it'll end the program. So notice when we created a function, we have private static string get speed. So private is the access modifier that we mentioned earlier. This means that any classes that are outside of this current class cannot access this method because it's only accessible by the current class or by something in the current class. Static means that you don't have to create an instance of this class to be able to use this method. String, this is the return type, so we are returning a string type. Here we are returning the message, and the message is a string. GetSpeed is the method name. Int is the data type of speed, which is a parameter that we are passing to the method. So this is the way that we essentially are able to use data from outside of this method and put it into the method so that we can do any operations or calculations. And then when we're done, we are returning that string back to the previous method. And then that speed will be used to print out a message. Notice how when we do an if statement, we are using parentheses. Here we are evaluating a condition using a comparison operator. So here we're using greater than or equal to. We could also use less than or equal to or double equal sign. There are also other ways to do comparisons, but this is how we're going to do it for now. And then we have curly braces. Curly braces opens up a code block. So here message equals you're going to get fired, buddy is a code block. Notice how we are also assigning a new value to the message every time we run through this method. So message will equal empty string, but then we will assign a value to it if it evaluates true for any condition. We also have an else condition. So if none of these conditions resolve to true, it'll still set the message as you're going too slow. A while loop also uses a condition. So you see here we have speed greater than 0. So as long as the speed is greater than 0, we're going to keep looping. So a loop means that it will go from the top to the bottom of this code block and then restart all over at the top and rerun all of the statements within that code block until the while condition says to exit. So that's it for this video. I hope it helps. In the next video, we will talk more about different loops and we will talk about other data structures and switch cases.